I wrote this book, hashtag what is mindfulness, because in my work as a clinical psychologist, a mindfulness teacher, and somebody who wants to share the benefits of mindfulness more widely, I kept coming across so many misunderstandings of what is mindfulness. And so this book is great for anybody who wants to get a quick overview of the territory of mindfulness and perhaps do a small dive into the topic in order to see if this is something they want to explore further. So the book includes a mixture of theory, some practice suggestions, and of course, I love to work with mindfulness in the real world. So there's lots of exercises that you can try straight away wherever you are. One of my colleagues, Dr. Tiago Tatton, told me that there are 94 definitions of mindfulness out and about in the various academic and scholarly literatures about mindfulness at the moment. This is literature that comes from the contemplative traditions, the more classical Buddhism, research that comes from psychology, cognitive neuroscience. We also find the word mindfulness in the philosophers, particularly places like Marcus Aurelius. And so there are versions of mindfulness all over our human experience, all over our human study of the mind. And it seems like, particularly with programs like MBSR and MBCT, which we tend to see here in the UK, at least in our healthcare service, these were very much anchored within a Buddhist framework and philosophy, in part because the founder, Jon Kabat-Zinn, was drawing on his own experience of Buddhism. And while that's great, my take on that is there are many other places that we can draw upon and still get to the same place, which is the ability to be present, to monitor what is arising moment by moment, to stay engaged with what's arising, and to respond rather than react to what we observe. Easy when things are going well, a little bit more tricky when things are difficult. So take a look and perhaps you'll find something interesting in there. I think what was great for me about writing this book, hashtag what is mindfulness, was the permission to really dive into a secular neuroscience-based model of mindfulness, and recognizing that mindfulness has multiple traditions and can be seen, from Buddhism, in creative practice, in philosophers, in psychotherapy, many places where we find mindfulness. But my sense is that in some of the standardized programs that are being offered, there's this very strong link to Buddhist philosophy. And while that's wonderful, it can have some barriers. And so what I'm interested in is what happens if we tear the book up, start again, we look through this lens of neuroscience and try to understand what is the mechanisms. How does this thing called mindfulness, how is it trained? How does it emerge? How does it stabilize? And working with this neurocognitive model in mind has really allowed me, myself as somebody with ADHD, and also working with my clients, to be able to really tailor exercises to help people with different sorts of cognitive profiles to access the exercises, to adapt the exercises in ways that really work for them. So I think this for me is the evolution, the innovation of mindfulness, is how do we make it more accessible to people? And my answer to that, my approach to that is, let's think about brain-wise design and design with the brain in mind, and let's see where that takes us. So let's take a look at what's in this book, hashtag what is mindfulness. And what I love about this book is it's got really short little sections that you can just read, little bite-sized bits of information that can be really helpful, particularly for the ADHD mind. So we've got chapter 1, what is mindfulness and what are its benefits? We've got chapter 2, how does mindfulness actually work? That's where I introduce the neurocognitive model, which is one of my top frameworks for teaching brain-wise mindfulness. Where does mindfulness come from? Massive topic, but I had a stab at just giving a general overview so you can have some understanding, like, is it Buddhism? Is it from psychology? Like, am I doing spiritual practice? What's going on? Chapter 4, how can I get the most out of my mindfulness? There I'm starting to give some tips about what you might want to do in order to try and train and do some micro practices day by day. Chapter 5, what are the key ways to develop mindfulness? There I'm introducing some of the more standard ways that we train and practice mindfulness. And chapter 6, what are the future possibilities? That's probably my favorite chapter, because as a mindfulness innovator, I'm always looking for ways in which we can spread and share mindfulness and tuck it in to our working processes, whether we're going to space or going in a VR headset. That for me is really the exciting stuff. But if you're just getting going, this is a great start. Fits in your pocket too. When I was writing this book, I really wanted to offer to people who have different kinds of minds, maybe like my own, which is ADHD kind of mind, to give them the opportunity to see that they can do mindfulness too. We need to do it differently, and it really helps to do it if you know a little bit about what you're supposed to be doing and what your brain is doing. And there's a whole chapter in here where I talk about how does mindfulness work. Now look, this is a little tiny book, so it's pretty high level. And if you're a kind of a scientist or a clinician who likes to dive deep, then, of course, we need to go to the original references and the academic research. But this book gives like a high level overview of the mechanisms of mindfulness and the brain networks that are involved in paying attention on purpose, moment by moment, and without judgment. And if you can wrap your head around that, what my patients and clients say is, oh, that makes it so much easier to understand what I need to do. Oh, now I get it. Now I get it. Those are the words I want to hear, because that means they're going to practice. And then if they practice, they're going to get the benefits. My favorite chapter in this book is the final chapter. What is the future of mindfulness? And for me, this is such a great question, because we've seen mindfulness sort of migrate out of the monasteries and the contemplative settings into the mainstream. We've got it in hospitals, in schools, in prisons. But I really believe that there is lots more that we can do with mindfulness if we can think outside of the box. And luckily my ADHD brain is like amazing at thinking outside of the box, in part because I'm just always struggling to think, how can I make this work so that my brain can work better, so that I can fit in, so that I can keep up, so that I can, connect and work with others. But I think if we design mindfulness training with the brain in mind, this is really what will allow us to innovate and be much more creative in terms of where we might place mindfulness and how we might use it in a broader context. And so one chapter in here as well talks about that neurocognitive model that I use as really a neuroscience grounding for designing, delivering, teaching, training in mindfulness. And people say they find it very helpful. The phrase that many of my clients and patients say to me, which is music to my ears, is when they say, oh, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And they usually say that when we've done a mindfulness practice and I've shared with them the model that's in chapter 2 of this book, #What is Mindfulness. This is Wendy Hasselkamp's 4-stage neurocognitive model of mindfulness. And when I saw it myself, it just made so much sense to me about what I'm supposed to be doing, what I'm supposed to do when my mind wanders, how it's normal that my mind wanders, and it's actually a step-by-step map for what to do if you're having trouble focusing. And so maybe you can see that you can use that for anything, whether it's focusing on your work, focusing on listening, focusing on doing a task or being creative or whatever it is that you're doing. I was using the neurocognitive model today when I was out for my run, focusing, mind wandering, noticing, and getting back. And it's so flexible and it makes it so clear. And when we're clear about what we need to do, often we will practice more. And we know that practice is a huge part of getting the benefits of mindfulness. So if that sounds interesting, please do check it out. It's available on Amazon. It's surprising how many different answers you can get if you ask the question, what is mindfulness? And depending on who you're talking to, you're going to get a variety of answers. We find mindfulness in the contemplative traditions, such as Buddhism, but it's also in various of Eastern traditions and practices. We also find the term mindfulness in creative practice, in philosophy, particularly the philosophy of Marcus Aurelius. We also know that there are different kinds of mindfulness that we find in psychotherapy, particularly the work of Ellen Langer. So mindfulness, as we know it in our secular landscape, can draw on a variety of different traditions and understandings. It doesn't need to just refer back to Buddhism. But I would say that the Buddhists have done a particularly thorough job of really delineating the stages of mindfulness training and what is required in order to get to those states of mindfulness: present, grounded, centered, kind, compassionate, and responding to what arises. So what is mindfulness? Well, I must say you need to get yourself this beautifully pocket-sized, handbag-sized book if you want to dive into that answer. But essentially, my response to that is mindfulness is a type of awareness or a state of mind that arises when certain conditions are met. One of those conditions is we need to be paying attention. And typically we're doing that with intention, with some purpose behind our attentional focus. We're required to monitor what's going on internally and externally, moment by moment. And the whole thing is done with this attitude of non-judging. That's just one of the definitions of mindfulness, that one particularly made famous by Jon Kabat-Zinn. But if you go to the literature, there's about 94 different definitions of mindfulness. Depending on where you look, who you talk to, they're all slightly different. So this question, what is mindfulness, is a really deep and interesting one that perhaps needed more than this little tiny book. But if you're interested and you want to take one small step into the world of mindfulness and see if there's something there for you, then I really would recommend this handy pocket-sized book. Part of what I wanted to do in this book, #What is Mindfulness, is address some of the very common misconceptions and myths about mindfulness. And I suppose one of them is this myth that mindfulness is all about relaxation. So let's look at the definition of mindfulness from Jon Kabat-Zinn: paying attention, on purpose, moment by moment, without judgment. That, to my ADHD brain, doesn't sound very relaxing. That sounds like there's quite a lot that my brain is doing. And this is the paradox that we're playing with mindfulness all the time, this balance of being alert and engaged with experience, whilst simultaneously receiving, allowing, and observing. And that for me has really been a huge part, a great fun part of my exploration of mindfulness. How do we make this play of alertness where we are engaged with our attention network, our intention network, our working memory, our monitoring networks of the brain, whilst at the same time sitting back and receiving? That is a skill that we need to train, and that's what mindfulness and mindfulness training is all about. If you want to dive in a little bit deeper with this very cute handbag-sized book, take a look and you can find it on Amazon. If I go to my bookshelf here, I've got literally hundreds of books on mindfulness, and one thing that always strikes me when I look at them is how varied the definitions of mindfulness are. So it depends. Is it a book coming from Buddhist traditions? Is it a book from psychotherapy or creative practice? What is mindfulness? And so this question really began to preoccupy me, so much so that I wrote a book called #What is Mindfulness? And I think, spoiler alert, mindfulness really needs to be whatever it needs to be for you. It's something about being present with what's going on, not with your mind rushing to the past or the future. It's something about having the resilience to respond to life's challenges rather than react and get triggered all over the place. It's definitely about cultivating self-compassion and kindness, and for many of us, really working with that inner voice that can be so punishing and mean sometimes. But there's many definitions and there's many traditions, and there's certainly more than one way to do this thing called mindfulness. So if you want to dip a toe and have a little bit of a look and see if this is something for you, I really recommend this very small pocket size, very cute little book. So you can start that journey and see what is mindfulness and see if it's going to make sense for you. When I wrote this book, I really wanted people to have a bite-sized reference to help them make sense of that landscape of mindfulness. This term is all over the place at the moment and often misused. And it's a deep and complicated topic. And so I wanted to make it simple for people so they could get a general sense, dip a toe in the water, as it were, in order to see if mindfulness is something that might be of interest to them. If you are going to take that journey to mindfulness, it can be a very deep and profound personal journey of self-discovery. But it's not for the faint-hearted, and it does involve some work. So no matter what your practice regime or how you're going to practice, and of course I love practicing mindfulness in motion in everyday life, no cushions for me. But if you are going to put that effort in, you've got to be really clear kind of what you're getting into. And so if you want to take a look at this book, you can find it on Amazon, and it's a bit of an overview of different aspects of what is mindfulness. In this book, #What is Mindfulness, I introduce my own functional definition of mindfulness. As somebody with ADHD, it was really helpful for me to understand where I was coming from and where I was going with mindfulness. And so in this book, I introduced this idea of the seesaw, which is we're wanting to move from a place where we're more often reactive, distracted, and judging, and we're moving to a place as much as we can, as often as we can, where we're present, kind, and responsive. And this is the journey that we're taking when we're training mindfulness, moving from distracted to present, from reactive to responsive, and from judgmental to kind. And so I found that functional definition really helpful. Let me know what you think.